Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar on the BISAC Subject Codes 2024 edition, released just today. I'm Brian O'Leary, Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group, and I'm proud to be able to say that we have Connie Harbison, Baker and Taylor, who is Chair of the BISAC Subject Codes Committee, here today to talk about both the update and some of the better practices around BISAC. Connie is no stranger to BISAC. She's been involved since just about the beginning of the code list, and she's chaired it longer than any other committee chair we have. We're proud to have her here, and we're really glad to be able to bring you an update of this magnitude at the end of this calendar year. Uh, Connie has quite a bit to cover today. We encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A box. We may not get to all of them, to be fair, but what we will do is collect all the questions we have, get answers from Connie or from or elsewhere before we send out the recording, and we'll include the answers where we can in the email that goes out with that recording. Connie, thank you for making the time today. Thanks for being here, and I really look forward to hearing your update.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks everybody for joining. Just a little preface before I start. Some of you might have heard some of this before. People who are brand new, this will be new to everyone who's brand new to one of my webinars, but some of the things you've probably heard before. To start, looking at these random titles on my title page, if anyone knows what these people have in common, that it's either the author or subject's birthday today. So a little trivia.
Perfect.
So our agenda today is a little bit about the BISAC Subject Committee, who we are and what we do. About new editions in general, what the timing of the new editions are, what elements are in a new edition. The highlights of our brand new edition. Discussion of merchandising themes. Just a few best practices for assigning headings. And how to request a new heading if you would like. But first, I want to just talk very briefly about the history of BISAC, and some of you who are at the annual meeting probably heard me say this already, but just a little background that in the 90s, BISAC stood for Book Industry System Advisory Committee, and it referred to a fixed format EDI that was used for exchanging book data. And over time, that acronym evolved to stand for the Book Industry Standards and Communications. Couldn't find a date when that change happened. Seemed to be like the late 90s. And the BISAC format is no longer used by publishers. Once they started to use Onyx for books, they didn't really use the fixed format anymore. But the name, we do retain the subject codes from that BISAC format, and that's where they get their name. They were just pretty much called like the subject codes, and over the years, that's how they got to be called the BISAC subject codes. Briefly about who we are on the committee. We represent all different segments of the book industry, publishers, wholesalers, retailers, data providers. We have all different, whoever is a member of BISG can be a part of that committee. And we hold varying positions within that committee. We have editors, we have vice presidents, we have and every level in between. And our representation is both from US and Canada. And the one common thing, we're all very different on the committee. The one common thing we have is that we're two common things. We're passionate about books and metadata, and we're all volunteers. None of us get paid to maintain this list. So the committee as a whole, we maintain the subject headings and the merchandising themes and the regional themes. If you're not familiar, we'll talk about the merchandising themes in a little later. We work to keep the heading list current and try to ensure that it meets the needs of the industry. And we provide guidance on the implementation and use of these standards. We do that through webinars like today, or FAQs, or just if people send inquiries, we'll try our best to answer. Each section or category of the subject list we review on a cyclical basis, adding and deleting codes as needed, or we update literals or the code description when necessary. We ask for and receive requests from all over in the publishing community, sometimes just from committee members. Sometimes people from a specialty publisher will reach out and say they have changes, and we're always happy to have that help. The committee meets once a month for 3 hours, and anyone who's interested in joining that committee, if you're interested, if you're employed by a BISG member company, you can join. And if you're not a BISG member, you should definitely contact Brian to join. As a member of the committee, and being part of the meetings, you can drive discussions on any changes that you think are of value in the industry. You can hear real use cases, which usually help us make better informed decisions. And you can bring expertise on a subject matter, which your company may specialize, or you may specialize as an individual. This is actually, I'll probably say this a couple times, this is actually the 30th edition of the subject headings. So the first edition that was released to the public was 1994. And today was released the 2024 edition. The list has grown significantly over the past 30 years. In 1994, we had about 2,023 headings. And today we have about 5,727 headings. Fiction has grown, probably had one of the most rapid growths over the past 30 years. That started with 50 headings in 1994, and that section now has 344 headings. So every year we're adding quite a number of headings. When we create a new edition, we look at all the requests that come in, or from outside the committee or from the committee, and we make revisions to sections based on those requests. We make major revisions to each section on, as I said, on a cyclical basis. So we looked at, we closely looked at drama the last, this 2024 edition, so we might not look at drama again for another couple editions, unless someone says, oh, you missed this drama heading, can you consider adding it? And then new versions are released on an annual basis. They're usually released in the fall. We missed it by a day for this edition, but let's just say it was released yesterday. So it was finished in the committee finished it in September. So it's just been undergoing some approvals and cleanup. The timeline of a new edition, this is basically the timeline of a new edition. Discussion begins on new headings, November. We meet to talk about the edition from November to September. We close the edition in September. Then we draft the proposal in October and circulate that proposal in October. And in November, that goes to the BISG Board of Directors for final approval. And in December, this is where we are now, the edition's being released by BISG. But if you look above, we are already well underway with the 2025, discussing the 2025 edition. The headings look like they're an alphanumeric code. They have 3 letters followed by 6 numbers. And the literal is the section name, which is the top level section with a backslash, and the subheading. And there may be further subheadings in some literals. We go down, 4 is the highest we go though. Just some examples below: fiction, romance, historical, Viking, medical surgery, pediatric, and travel special interest, family. In the code, the first 3 letters represent the section. However, you can't read the that code as a hierarchical number. And I will show you why in a minute, but the codes are intended for use in electronic files, and the literals are intended for print and display purposes. The code on a heading will never change. So when we change a literal, if we change that, say we change cooking courses and dishes to bread to toast, it would still retain CKB 009. So here's an example of why, why you can't look at a tree or the codes as a hierarchy. Things get moved all the time. This Earth Sciences was a standalone heading up until edition 2.6. Since it's been made into this tree, but when that in 2.6, when that Earth Science tree was being created, geography is SCI 030. Well, it was probably science geography, but got changed to science, Earth Sciences geography, and now got moved under 019. And that's probably the case with most of these headings, why they are out of order. We probably had science, meteorology, and climatology, and that was probably a standalone. And it got moved into this tree, but it retained its number, so it's Sci 042. Sometimes if it's a brand new tree, if it's something like we just added, it will look like it's in a hierarchy because it's brand new and nothing got changed in it yet. So if it's a brand new tree, it will probably be a hierarchy for at least a year, but could not be the following edition. I talked a little about trees and branches. So level 1 is the highest subject. That would be something like history, fiction, drama, etc. And level 2 would be we call it a standalone heading if it's just by itself. If it's just like fiction, romance, we would call that a standalone heading. But that's the next, if you're drilling down and to get something more specific, that would be the next level. And then we made fiction romance a tree. So the first branch in that tree would be level 3. In this case, fiction romance LGBTQ plus. And we can go down as far as level 4, which in this case would be romance LGBTQ plus gay. And that would be a 4-level heading, and that would be in the romance tree. When you are assigning subjects, you want to drill down as far as you can. You want to make sure that, there's no tree that you can drill deeper into and get a more specific subject. In terms of the 2024 edition, for the naming convention of the edition, it's named for the year that it's created or closed. That's why it's the 2024 edition, because we closed it in September 2024. So we're working on the 2025 edition now, and that will be next year. We'll meet here talking about the 2025 edition in December, likely in December. As I said, this is the 30th edition of the BISAC subjects, and it will be released today. So a new edition, what's the elements of a new edition? A new edition contains literal changes, inactivations, new headings, and reactivations. We don't do reactivations a whole lot. A reactivation would be if we wanted to add a heading that we inactivated a long time ago, we know we have that code, and we don't want to assign the same heading a new code. So we'll just look at the inactivations and say, oh, here's that subject we want to revive. So we're just going to use the same code. So literal changes, we make those for a couple reasons. One is to update a literal to a more common or acceptable term. 2 is to organize like headings into hierarchical trees. And we'll see that a little later in the art section with drawing and painting trees. We might update a literal to expand or clarify the scope of a heading. For instance, in the juvenile sections, we had clothing and dress, and now that heading is clothing, dress, and hair. But we might update a literal to reduce the scope of a heading. For example, in the 2022 edition, we had religion, indigenous, folk, and tribal. And in the 2023 edition, that was changed to religion, folk, and tribal. And we added a new tree for religion, indigenous. So if you had indigenous titles in REL 029, you should have gone in and moved them to the new tree, since 029 did not cover indigenous anymore. The 2024 edition has 223 new headings, 129 changes to literals, 3 inactivations, no reactivations, 9 new headings to merchandising themes, and 3 literal changes to merchandising themes. The top 5 sections with adds and changes were fiction, foreign language studies, art, Bibles, and drama. But we're not going to talk about those specific 5 today. Here's a little overview of what was added to each section. So 26 sections had at least one addition. We added 1 heading to gardening, 42 headings to fiction. So that just gives you an idea. The ones that have a higher count are the ones we spent more time on. The ones that have probably 1 new heading are probably suggestions that came in from outside the committee. And we had literal changes to 18 sections. If you will notice that foreign language study had 46 literal changes, which is a lot. Looking at the percentage change for each section, foreign language study had a literal change for every heading, so 100% change. By percent, it's foreign language study, drama, art, humor, and true crime that had the most changes of based on the size of the list and the adds and changes summed together. So today we're going to look at most of those top 5. We're going to look at with the inclusion of fiction. So we'll look at foreign language study. We'll look at drama. We'll look at art, fiction, and humor in some detail, but then I'll also pull out a few other highlights, just where there were trees created or, good things added. Oh, it's all good. They're all good. So for foreign language study, we had 46 literal changes. That's the whole list. The top level was completely renamed to language study. But remember, the codes do not change. So the codes will retain the FOR to represent the section. So this is an example, kind of like body, mind, and spirit, which has a code of OCC because it used to be occult and got changed to body, mind, and spirit. So now foreign language study is language study. And these were, here's an example of how the headings were changed. So for foreign language 008000 was foreign language study French. Now it's language study French. And in this case, these three codes, they all start with FOR and they're still, but now their literal is language study. Next up, we have drama. And drama, just as a reminder, the drama headings are used for dramatic works written for the stage. And the subjects can be used alone for one author or with drama anthologies if there's multiple authors. But by the subjects we added, you have to remember that they should only be used for dramatic works written for the stage and play scripts. So we added 29 new headings to drama. And these are some of the new headings we added. These were requested by a group of drama publishers, and clearly they know what they publish and what their play scripts are about. So these were the headings we added for them in just throughout the drama section. But then in addition, we created a subjects and themes tree. The subjects and themes tree is what the script is about. So there'll probably a lot of dramas are about family or related to family, so you would assign drama subjects and themes family. The next section that had a pretty large overhaul was art. This had 24 new headings, 18 literal changes, and 2 inactivations. We made a lot of changes to the art history tree. You can see on the left, the 2024 edition, and on the right, the 2023 edition, and on the right, the 2024 edition. So these headings were inactivated because we felt that there were already headings outside of the history tree for them. These headings crossed out in red were all moved to a new movements tree, which we'll look at in a minute. And these 2 headings in red had a literal change in the history tree. And then this whole, all of these headings with a date range or time period were added to the history tree. So that's how we got from the 2023 edition to the 2024 edition in art history. We added a movements tree. I know we don't have every movement that there is here. We tried to look at movements that had the most titles published about them. And you're probably looking at it and saying, oh, why is it not alphabetical? We tried to sort it. We tried to sort it by time period. So whatever movement comes first, and medieval comes first, then Renaissance, then Baroque. So that's why it gets a non-alphabetical sort. You could use these headings with a history heading if you wanted, with a time period. If it's a book about Art Deco, but in the 21st century, you might want to say that in your description, in your BISACs. This is art movements, Art Deco, and this is art history, 21st century. Those were the ones, the blue ones are the ones where the literal changed. Remember on the previous slide I showed you, I had them crossed out from the history tree. This is where they went. And all of the red ones are brand new. We made a little movement in the art techniques tree. If you remember, I talked about how sometimes we tree things. So this is the techniques tree, but we went a little further with it to create a techniques painting tree. We took these 3 headings or 4 headings, and we created art techniques painting tree. And then we took these 5 headings and created a techniques drawing tree. Sometimes when we move things into trees, it's just, it makes it a little easier to find for people if they don't have access to looking at the section as a whole or to searching the whole list. They might see painting and just say, I'm going to sign painting, because they don't see oil and watercolor and acrylic. But when we make it into a tree, then they have the opportunity to drill down to see if there's something more specific. I know it's art techniques painting, and oh, look, I can drill down one more level for different kinds of painting. So it's just a way that we organize the codes to try to make it easier for people to find things. We also added an Art European tree with Dutch, French, German and Austrian, Italian, and Spanish. Again, we know every European country is not represented here, but we tried to look at the ones that had the most titles. And just some miscellaneous headings in art. We added art disability, art diversity and multicultural, and art techniques and plein air and urban. And next up, we have everybody's favorite, the fiction section. Here we added 42 new headings and made 7 literal changes. First up, we have a horror tree. Previously, we only had fiction horror. So we created a tree for horror. So you have, if you publish horror titles, you have 6 additional headings to choose from to make add a more specific BISAC to your title. We also added a places tree. This would be where the book takes place. You can combine it with another genre. You can say, oh, this is fiction places, I don't know, Asia, and you can combine that with fiction horror slasher. So that would be a slasher novel taking place in Asia. We'll talk a little bit more about adding multiple codes to your headings towards the end of the presentation. And we added tons of new romance headings. These were brought to us by a number of different publishers or data providers or retailers, online retailers, who felt that that these were necessary, and there were a lot of titles within each of these. Romance is always growing. There's always some kind of new romance genre, subgenre coming out, and people just want to, it's a section where consumers want to find like what a very specific thing, like they don't want to just wade through all these romance books to find the one type of romance book they're looking for. So, and then some additional headings that we added, books, bookstores and libraries, Christian women, death, grief, bereavement, erotica, LGBTQ plus, non-binary and genderqueer, family life, multi-generational, family life, parenthood and children, fantasy cozy, historical 19th century general, fiction, LGBTQ plus, non-binary and genderqueer, school and education, science fiction, androids, robots, and artificial intelligences, and travel and vacation.
Connie,
Yes.
I was wondering if there was a question that came in from Lee about having something like fiction, historical 19th century general. Why is there a general in the 4th level? Could you just explain how the tree works for a category like that?
Sure. So there's a general in the 4th level because so fiction, historical, 19th century, we made that into a tree. So that's a 4-level heading. So underneath 19th century, there are several headings about which are very specific to the 19th century. Just to find that.
And these are kind of regrouped, so you had to create a 4th level and a general so that you knew that if the subheadings were not applicable, you could at least use the general.
Yeah, so the way that, why this is a new heading is because, there were headings, fiction historical, and there were various ones, the Civil War era, World War One, World War Two, and post-World War Two. And we pulled those out of, just historical to add them to a century. So we had, I think we had 20th century general, and we had World War One, World War Two, post-World War under that. But then we wanted to add American Civil War era, and we had to create a 19th century tree to move that heading into the 19th century tree, since we couldn't put it in the 20th century tree. So that's why there's a new heading for a general, because we didn't have one before, and we wanted to create a tree. And the only way we can do that is by adding a brand new heading, a general heading. I
Thank you.
hope that, I hope that was clear.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
We made a lot of changes to humor. We have 8 new headings there and 3 literal changes. Our new headings are, our literal changes are, we had form, anecdotes, and quotations. That's changed to form, anecdotes, epigrams, and quotations. For topic, we had health and aging, which is now health and medicine. And topic sports is now sports and recreation. And then our new headings are aging, which we took out of, we had previously health and aging, and then we broke aging out into its own topic. Art and literature, death and grief, fashion and style, food and drink, generational, long crime, and military. So those were the top sections that we made changes to, where we added, where we made the most changes. But I'm going to go through a couple, I'm going to go through a couple highlights, new trees that were created, just so you can see what else is out there. I'll pause for a second there. Brian, are there any other questions?
Connie, we had one relative to language study.
Okay.
Rachel's asking, would the change of the name to language study mean that books about learning or breaking down the fundamentals of English be included in the future?
Yes. Yes. Well, we have in language study, we do have ESL as a heading, in English as a second language. But if it's about English grammar or spelling, we do have the language arts and disciplines section. So because in the language study section, I believe the only English heading is for English as a second language. If you had a book that was about English grammar and English study, you'd probably want to use language arts and disciplines, and one of the headings in that top level.
Okay. And part of the thinking too is to try and move away from using the word foreign, but rather to talk about languages in a more neutral way, I think.
Yes.
Yep.
Anything else, Brian?
No, that covers the questions we have at the moment.
Thank you. Okay. We added a health and fitness, beauty and grooming tree. We had health and fitness, beauty and grooming, so we made that a general and then made it into a tree to include hair, makeup, nails, and skincare. So now you can specify, if you do beauty books, you can specify, what type of beauty or grooming it is. We added a juvenile fiction fantasy tree. Prior to this, we only had fantasy, juvenile fiction, fantasy, and magic. So we changed fantasy and magic to fantasy general and added a new heading for fantasy magic. So a note about that, fantasy general is retaining the code from fantasy and magic, while the heading fantasy magic has a brand new code. So if you have a lot of titles under juvenile fiction, fantasy, and magic, they're not wrong if they're fantasy. Now they're just fantasy general. And if you want to specify the magic part, then you would have to put a new code on them. So our fantasy tree, in addition, includes contemporary, fairies, historical, magic, portals and alternate worlds, and witches and wizards. We created new LGBTQ plus trees in juvenile fiction, juvenile nonfiction, and young adult nonfiction. Young adult fiction already has one. And of course, these all have start with an LGBTQ plus general. In the interest of space, though, I did not put it here. So for the juvenile headings, we added gay, lesbian, bisexual, non-binary, and genderqueer, transgender, two-spirited, and indigiqueer. And in young adult, bisexual, gay, lesbian, non-binary, and genderqueer, transgender, and two-spirited, and indigiqueer. The reason we kind of put gay, lesbian, and bisexual together into one heading for the juvenile headings is mostly because of the type of books that are out there and the quantity of books, and the books just aren't as specific as they are for, in the young adult world. So right now we didn't feel the need to have, split that into 3 different headings. Every section that had LGBTQ plus got a non-binary and genderqueer branch. So this is every heading that had an LGBTQ plus tree, and most of them already had other headings, other branches in that tree, so they just got non-binary and genderqueer as an addition. We added 4 headings to the true crime section. I don't really talk about the true crime section because it's often, it's very small, probably overlooked a lot, but we did add a number of headings there, so I wanted to call them out. Just remember true crime, the true crime titles, as odd as they may seem, these headings should only be used for non-fiction titles. So if you have, a story about, or a book about a domestic violence, even if the story is crazy and sounds made up, but it isn't, you want to use true crime on it. Some additional highlights. Cooking, boards and platters. Computers, artificial intelligence, generative AI. Health and fitness, college and university students. Social science, intersectionality. Travel, special interest, romantic. Travel, special interest, solo. young adult fiction Gothic, and young adult nonfiction, social topics, consent, and boundaries. So those are most of the highlights of the 2024 edition in terms of the subject headings. There's a couple other things you might find there, a couple other literal changes, a few other new headings, but that's pretty much went through the highlights. So now we're going to turn a little bit to the merchandising themes. What are merchandising themes? The merchandising themes are a list of terms that represent frequently requested merchandising themes and topics so that various organizations within the book industry can assemble the materials appropriate to that theme or topic. What does that mean? Well, if you see this graphic, this display in the background, it looks like it's all DVDs, but they could have used merchandising themes to pull together these titles. We have a Women's History Month merchandising theme. So if publishers were to assign that a book was appropriate for Women's History Month, then retailers or libraries would know to pull together, include that book in any kind of display like this. They are used in addition to subject codes. They could denote an audience to which a work may be of particular appeal, a time of year or event for which a work may be especially appropriate, or a frequently requested topic. It's an optional field. They're separate from the subject field. And although they're related, subject codes and theme codes should not be placed in the same field. The theme code is a little different in format. Anyway, it's two letters and 3 numbers. And in addition to grouping together works that can be classified under a variety of subjects, the field can be used to further describe fictional works that have been subject coded by genre. So if it's if it has fiction holidays, we have merchandising themes for holidays. So you can put, you would be able to use that fiction code in conjunction with a merchandising theme for holiday. The merchandising themes have 132 codes. We just added 9. We have cultural heritage, event, holiday, publisher type, and topical. The publisher type, we're not gonna look at those. That there's only a few. There's only 3 codes under there, and they're academic and university, independent, self-published. So if you were using these and you're an independent publisher, you can assign that merchandising theme to your title. The first one we'll talk about is cultural heritage. Here's some examples of the cultural heritage headings. And here's an example of books you could pull together. Say you have cultural heritage Chinese, you want to pull together some kind of all the titles that related to China and Chinese. So you can pull books from all different sections. You can pull juvenile, you can pull language, travel, fiction, cooking, all types of books you can pull together that are about China or being Chinese. Then we have events. And this could be something like an anniversary, back to school, birthday, graduation, Pride Month, the Super Bowl, teacher appreciation. And an example of that is, here's graduation. And again, you're pulling together books from all different categories that are about all different things, but have one thing in common, that they're related to graduation. Or if it's something like, oh, the places you go, you know, a great and traditional graduation gift. And for holiday, we have many, many holidays. These are just some examples. Cinco de Mayo, Diwali, Election Day, Father's Day, Juneteenth, Lunar New Year, Rosh Hashanah, St. Patrick's Day, Thanksgiving, and Valentine's Day. So for example, if it's Juneteenth and you want to pull some books together, you can, you know, if you had all these, some children, some picture books, a biography, you can pull all these together as they're related to Juneteenth. Another example, say you want to put, you know, pull together books that might be great Father's Day gifts. You know, you can pull together, they don't have to specifically be about Father's Day. They could just be of interest, you know, to fathers, or, you know, good potential Father's Day gifts. So, you know, things that fathers might like are do-it-yourself stuff, or ballparks, baseball, cars, football. So it's pulling together all those very, very dissimilar titles, which would not have the same BISAC code at all, but pulling them all together and saying, look, here's these books, they're great Father's Day presents. And last up, we have topical. Some examples are banned books, Christian interests, coming of age, inspiration, LGBTQ plus interests, own voices, social media personalities, teen interest, women's interest. And here's an example of topical, where it's pulling together all of these books that are LGBTQ plus interest. So again, they're all different topics. They're all different high-level topics, but, you know, they have something of interest to the LGBTQ audience. So that's merchandising themes. Does anyone have any questions, Brian, on merchandising themes?
Brian is asking if we have any data on the usage of merchandising themes, and I think that we don't have formal, but we know that there's increasing interest, particularly among retailers, in using them, right?
Yes.
So
Yes,
I
no, we
think,
have no data on the uptake of them, but they've been around a while, and we're hoping that that they do gain traction, because they're quite a useful tool.
and we have within the committee for 2025, part of our work plan is some consideration of what we might do to either increase adoption or find out if there are roadblocks to adoption. So that's part of our thinking for the work that we'll do in committee in the coming 12 months.
Thanks, Brian. I mentioned earlier about using multiple headings. You know, people question, should I use multiple headings? And the answer is yes, you should, whenever it's applicable. However, sometimes, you know, sometimes there's no single right subject. Different customers may approach your title from different angles. You do want to cover all aspects of a title. However, you don't need to add both a general and a specific heading from the same tree. So you wouldn't need to add fiction, romance, 19th century general, and fiction, romance, 19th century Civil War era You don't need to add both of those, just the specific one is fine. But you do have a lot of books that, you know, might need a multiple heading to describe it fully. I was trying to think of some example. I have a few, but I was trying to think of another example, and I thought, okay, so say you have a slasher novel that takes place on Christmas, among a group of siblings, or something like that. And you might assign it something like fiction horror slasher, fiction family life siblings, and fiction holidays. And if it took place on Christmas, you could assign it a merchandising theme as well. But it's things like that. That's kind of a wild example. You might have something like, if you have a book on Walt Disney World, you can assign it travel special interest, amusement park and theme parks, and travel United States South Atlantic. So adding multiple codes to your title is great and requested if your book has multiple aspects to it. The number of subject codes. The number you send per ISBN depends on the structure of the database housing the record. This is on the side of the sender and the recipient. So some senders or recipients might be able to handle 3, others might be able to handle unlimited. There's no limit on the number of codes by the ONIX structure. A book with a very focused topic could very reasonably have one topic. Say you have a book on learning how to knit. All that needs is crafts and hobbies, needlework, knitting, doesn't need anything else. And the committee doesn't really have a guideline on how many you should or what the limit should be. But assigning more than 3 would be a bit unusual. That has the potential to confuse customers and give them a lot of false hits when they're searching. Like if you have one chapter about, you know, a certain topic, but your book's not really about that, then, you know, customer might not be looking for that. So you want to stick to, you know, what the book is really about. We'll just go through a couple best practices. I'll go through these quickly. The BISAC should be assigned based on the book's content, not on the merchandising plans. You want to assign the most precise subject and do so in order of importance. So your most important subject should be BISAC 1, just in case there are people who only can take the first BISAC. And the most specifics, always the best. So that should be the number 1, BISAC 1. You want to use logical guidelines. You shouldn't mix fiction with nonfiction headings. You should use subjects in the fiction section only for individual works of fiction or for collections of fiction. And you shouldn't mix juvenile, young adult, and adult headings with each other. So whatever your audience is, the BISAC code should match. If your book is 7 to 9, grades 7 to 9, you should be using a young adult heading. You want to use subjects in the language study section for books about the languages specified. Don't use that section if the book is in a language. So you shouldn't be using language study French for a French translation of a John Grisham novel. Health and fitness should be used more for works aimed at non-professionals, and the medical headings more for professionals. There's a lot of overlap amongst those 2 sections. So if instead of assigning health and fitness and medical, you know, you want to look at whether your book is who the audience of your book might be. And this is similar with various other combinations such as nature and science and self-help and psychology. One of those is more technical and more for professional use than the other, and there is some overlap. And lastly, you want to reevaluate your backlist coding every now and again. As we talked about, the codes are updated yearly and new headings added may be better. So recoding a title would make it more discoverable. For example, say you have a book and it's about intersectionality. Right now, you might have it under social science minority studies, or I actually saw a new one, a forthcoming one in our database under social science sociology general. But now you can classify it under social science intersectionality, and a consumer would be much more likely to find that specific title than they would under social science sociology general. So if there's a new heading, you might want to look at the new headings and consider your backlist. And finally, heading suggestions. If you have a suggestion for a new heading that you would like to see added, anyone can submit suggestions to the committee. There's a form on the BISG website to fill out for single subject suggestions. If you have dozens, you can, don't have to use a page of the form for everyone. You can just email them to the BISG email. But we do discuss pretty much all the requests received from in that form or via email. Though sometimes the requests are too vague or they just make no sense to us. I could do a webinar just on how people fill out the form wrong or incorrectly. So, you have to be specific and you have to be clear, or else we won't know what you're asking for. And things you want to think about before you submit that suggestion. You want to consider whether the heading could be applied to at least 100 unique ISBNs in publication. You want to consider whether the heading would be used by all publishing companies or could be used by all publishing companies. Consider whether it's too narrow or too broad. And consider our 54 top level sections to determine where your suggestion might fit. You should have, if you want to suggest a new top level, it should be supported by a lot of research and support from multiple publishers. And we would probably ask you to come in to present to the committee. Last time we added a new top level, I think it was design, and we had several art publishers come in to committee meeting to talk about why, they thought they needed a design section. So if you have a new top level suggestion, don't use the form, just send an email and we'll get in touch with you. And you want to see if a comparable or less specific heading may already exist for what you're asking for. If something similar exists, that you could use, we're not going to add, a new heading that's that similar to an existing. And just a note on the examples, they should be from multiple authors, from multiple publishers, of current titles that are still in print. And if the requests don't have examples of 10 to 25 titles from different publishers, we may not discuss them. And that could be it could be as simple as just gathering a link to Goodreads and sticking it in the form, or emailing an Excel spreadsheet of examples to us. We don't need the physical books. We just need to see what the titles are and the descriptions of them. And finally, any questions, any additional questions, if we have time?
Connie, we're a few minutes over, but the good news is we actually were able to ask you some of the questions along the way, so we're pretty caught up. I wanted to just reflect to you some comments that folks have made just as you were wrapping up. Julie was just saying it was great info as always, and she found that some of your slides were pretty charming. Kathy
Thank
was
you.
Both Kathy and Elizabeth were saying that they truly appreciate the energy and enthusiasm that the volunteers on this committee bring to maintaining the standard and making sure that books reach readers. And Lee added that this session was really helpful. So I really appreciate you making the time today.
And there's my email address, jot it down. If anyone has additional questions on anything, feel free to email me directly as well.
And you also accept pictures of dogs, right?
I do. If anyone has their dog, wants to come on camera with their dog, that's
That's the place
perfectly.
to go. All right, thank you for this, Connie. Thank you for the update. As we said at the outset, the new code list is available for download free to members and as a paid product for non-members. Today, we'll be working this week to finish the update of the free web resources on the BISG website. That will take us a few days, but we'll get it done shortly. And after we're done, we'll send out an email to let everybody know.
Thank you so much, Brian.
All right, take care.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.